Morning, everyone. It's good to see everyone back in the Capitol. We had a very robust discussion during today's caucus meeting, focused on both the domestic issues that are of great importance to the American people, working on lowering gas prices, lowering food prices, dealing with inflation, building upon the tremendous success of the Biden economy so far, tackling the challenges that are in front of us. And also continuing to meet our responsibilities to stand by Ukraine, the free world, democracy, truth, as opposed to dictatorship, tyranny, and propaganda, which is what Vladimir Putin represents, the Russian war of aggression represents, and unfortunately, some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle also represent. There'll be more than a dozen bills on the floor today, bipartisan bills to deal with continuing support to the people of Ukraine. We will stand by them until victory has been won. Let me now yield to our distinguished Vice Chair, Pete Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our caucus spent the last 2 weeks back in our districts highlighting our work in passing the bipartisan infrastructure law and the American Rescue Plan and capping the cost of insulin, in addition to talking about community funding projects back in our communities. We continue to push for legislation that lowers healthcare costs, invests in clean energy, increases domestic energy production, and reduces our deficit by making millionaires and billionaires, like people who can afford to buy social media companies for $44 billion, pay their fair share in taxes. House Republicans oppose this. They'd rather raise taxes on millions of working people who can least afford it, including seniors, to support tax fairness for billionaires and wealthy corporations. Rather than invest in the next generation by protecting against the impact of climate change, they want to punish those on Social Security and Medicare. House Republicans believe in an economy that works only for those at the top. We have a vision for an economy that promotes opportunity and rewards hard work. When we're able to enact this vision into law, it's going to raise the quality of life for working people all across this country. That's what the chairman and the leadership of the House Democratic Caucus continue to focus on during this legislative period. Thanks so much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Pete. Questions?
Forecasts for recession are really escalating every week. Is there any new, maybe emergency legislation you're looking at to either fight inflation or protect Americans from a major economic slowdown?
Well, we're continuing to build upon the progress that has been made by President Biden over his first 15 months in office. I think it's important to take note of the fact that the economy was on the brink of collapse when President Biden was inaugurated. The American Rescue Plan was enacted. Not a single Republican voted for it. And we've had a tremendous economic turnaround ever since. 8 million good-paying jobs created during President Biden's first 15 months in office. That is a record in American history for a similar period of time. Fastest rate of economic growth in 40 years. Unemployment at 3.6%. Wages have increased. All of that has been accomplished, and the deficit was reduced in President Biden's first year by $350 billion. We're on track for a more than $1 trillion reduction in the deficit in President Biden's second year. That's a tremendous economic record, a foundation to build upon. And so we're interested in the literature as it relates to the prognostications in terms of where we are as an economy. The most important thing that we can continue to do is do the work. And do the work means lowering costs for everyday Americans in many of the areas that Vice Chair Aguilar outlined.
Okay, I apologize. I have two very different questions for you. The first one is, are you concerned about the New York maps and that they'll be overturned? And are you surprised by the turns that this has taken since they were drawn? The second is more up here. What do you make of the McCarthy tapes that we're hearing about his comments in the aftermath of January 6th and his defense of those now, that he was just playing through scenarios of, what Trump should do?
Well, with respect to the first question, it's pending litigation. We'll see what the Court of Appeals decides. and it's probably not appropriate for me to comment until the Court of Appeals makes its final decision. I think there are strong arguments that have been made that the legislature is following the guidance of the Constitution to draw districts anchored in communities of interest. And we'll see what the Court of Appeals decides. With respect to the second part of the question, I'm tempted to yield to our Vice Chair, Pete Aguilar. But I'll simply say, the radical right playbook is simple. It's not complicated. It's in our face each and every day. It's a 5-point playbook. Number 1, lie. Number 2, lie. Number 3, lie. Number 4, lie. Number 5, lie again. That's the radical right playbook. Lie about COVID. Lie about the economy. Lie about the election. Lie about Democrats. Lie about the border. Lie and lie again. And so the American people will have a clear choice to make in terms of the contrast between what Democrats are all about, delivering real results for the people, and a group of folks who lie with impunity, facts don't matter, hypocrisy is not a constraint to their behavior, and they think that shamelessness is a superpower. Vice Chair Aguilar.
All I'll say is the American public doesn't know who Mike Kevin is. What the American public needs to know is that this is a Republican Party that is the chairman mentioned, more committed to lie and then to lie when they're caught about lying than they are about delivering help to everyday Americans. They don't want to talk about legislative solutions. They don't want to talk about lowering the price of healthcare. They don't want to talk about those issues. They'd rather continue to support the big lie, lie about everything else, lie when they're caught, and then giving standing ovations. It's so, we'll have the January 6th committee will obviously have, more to talk about, in the future. But I think that's what the American public wants is, will there be accountability? Will there be people in Congress who stand up in the face of this pressure? I'm thankful enough to serve with 2 Republicans who are on that committee, but few and far between. People who are willing to stand up and speak about the issues that matter and actually deliver the truth when it's needed. And this place used to be a little different, and I think that's what disappoints a lot of folks here.
So Title 42 has divided Democrats in both chambers. If the Senate sends over amended COVID legislation or Ukraine supplemental that includes putting Title 42 back in place or keeping it in place, do you guys bring it up? What do you do?
Well, that's a hypothetical scenario. And so until we see the Senate act in this area or in any other area, I think it would be irresponsible of me to get out ahead of the caucus and comment on legislation that may or may not manifest itself. With respect to the Biden administration's plan, Secretary Mayorkas will be before Homeland Security today. Will be before Judiciary tomorrow. Look forward to hearing from him, questioning him, and figuring out how we can continue to make sure that we have a secure border, follow the public health guidance and the science as it relates to Title 42, and also make sure that we both uplift these 2 twin ideals of America, which is both the rule of law and a nation of immigrants. Pete? Back to this side, yeah.
With some of the tensions that the Title 42 has brought among Democrats and the White House, as well as President Biden, some of his lowering poll numbers, are you concerned that this might impact or increase the risk of some of the vulnerable members of your caucus even further?
With respect to the House Democratic Caucus, things are puppies and rainbows, wine and roses right now. Are you seeing what's happening on the other side of the aisle? Like, We are actually focused on dealing with issues, solving problems on behalf of the American people. The chaos that exists, the dissension that exists, the tension that exists, the infighting that exists, the bickering that exists, the shots fired that exist in this Capitol are happening within the House Republican Conference, not us. We're continuing to do the business of the American people.
On a federal gas tax holiday, is that something that you and leadership would support?
It's part of the discussion, and the discussion is ongoing. We are definitely going to act to try to address the geopolitical issues that relate to gas prices being where they are, act in terms of some of the supply chain challenges. It would be a useful thing if the oil companies made a decision to actually lean in on the permits that they currently have to do something about the supply and demand challenges instead of being more concerned with rewarding their shareholders, lining their pockets to the detriment of everyday Americans and the American consumer. But we're going to act. I don't think a decision has been made in terms of which of the many different legislative proposals is the right way to go. But this is an issue that was featured prominently in our leadership meeting yesterday and featured prominently in our discussion before the caucus earlier today.
Before recess, Speaker Pelosi said she had concerns with it. It depletes the infrastructure fund. Oil companies could benefit and not pass those savings on to consumers. She seemed very cool to the idea. Is the mood shifting, or you continue to have concerns about it?
I think it's fair to say that with respect to the effort to lower gas prices, nothing has been ruled in and nothing has been ruled out. Go back to
on Title 42 yesterday, Leader Schumer said he acknowledged the divisions within his conference and said that there's an effort underway to come to a consensus position that all Democrats could support. Is there a need for something like that in the House Democrats? And if so, what would something like that look like?
Well, we always work to try to find, the highest common denominator amongst us, and that's what we do. We're not a cult, we're a coalition. If you're a cult, it's very easy. You just take orders from the cult leader. Doesn't matter how reckless, how irresponsible, how dangerous, how untethered from reality. You just bend the knee to the cult leader and fall in line. Thankful that you have patriotic Republicans like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger who are not doing it, but they're few and far between. That's a cult. We're a coalition that represents the broadest possible gorgeous mosaic of the American people in terms of race and religion and sexual orientation and gender and life experiences and region and, yes, ideology, from the center to the center left to the left, common sense Democrats. So we always are going to engage in a process of trying to discuss our different public policy perspectives and then find the highest common denominator to advance the ball for the American people. That's what we'll do in this area and in every other area.
I think what House Democrats are concerned about is that this should be a public health decision. So that should guide our discussions. This was clearly a Trump era border suppression policy that had some public health wording, but this is really about public health. We need lawful paths to declare asylum. We need to restore order at the border. All of these things are important, and we can do these, but this is on us as well in Congress. And so I appreciate that the Senate wants to try to find consensus. I would appreciate also if they acted on some of the immigration-related bills that we have sent over to them in a bipartisan way, because the time to address this, the best time to address this, was in the past when we had bipartisan consensus on immigration reform before Marco Rubio backed away from a deal that he negotiated. But the second best time to address it is now. And so this is on Congress to play a role. the administration has requested almost twice as much funding for USCIS for processing asylum claims. That will help. We need to deliver on that. We need to speed up the process for legal paths for asylum. Those are the things that we can control and that we can do here while we build consensus. But this is on us as well. And the chairman will hear from Secretary Mayorkas tomorrow. In Judiciary, I'll hear from him after this meeting in Homeland Approps.
Leader Schumer just told reporters that he's expecting the administration to send Ukraine supplemental over tomorrow. Would you support pairing this with the coronavirus money that the administration also wants?
Well, I think we have to support Ukraine and meet the needs as articulated by the administration. And we also have to continue to make sure that our public health infrastructure is robust enough to be able to continue our efforts to crush the virus, which the Biden administration has done a good job of to date, fighting through the Delta variant and the Omicron variant, now the BA2 subvariant. And the likelihood is there will be something that comes next. And so I think it's important for the administration to have the resources necessary so that America is prepared. What the legislative vehicle is to get that done, we'll see what the possible pathway is, particularly as it relates to the Senate. The House, as always, is prepared to act and act decisively. As Vice Chair Aguilar said on immigration, which we've already done, sent over a bipartisan Dream and Promise Act, legislation to address TPS recipients, legislation to address farm workers. And the Senate will have to make its decisions about how to address any and all of these areas, which we anxiously await whatever path they choose.
Another question on COVID. Yesterday, we saw two members of the Senate and Vice President Kamala Harris test positive. I believe Anthony Fauci said he will not be attending the White House Correspondents' Dinner out of fear of COVID. Are you all confident in the administration's current approach to the virus, which, at least as far as I can tell, is sort of about trying to live with the virus and sort of continue without imposing further restrictions?
Yes, I'm comfortable with their current approach.
Follow up on Title 42, please, with Secretary Mayorkas being up here the next 2 days. Is there any way to possibly use the judge's decision to delay lifting Title 42 as a way to bring Republicans on board with the kind of legislative incentives that you all talked about?
I think the chairman and I both look forward to the public questions that our colleagues on both sides of the aisle will ask and the comments and responses that Secretary Mayorkas is going to give. He released yesterday a 6-point plan that includes a lot of items that have been supported by folks on both sides of the aisle throughout the years. We look forward to hearing his answers, and then we can have a conversation about the next steps. But clearly, the administration, the CDC has made that determination for May 23rd. We're focused on the policy solutions that we have between now and then.
Last two questions, yeah.
Just a quick follow-up on gas prices. You talked about a lot of the options. Is there a timeline? We've heard Memorial Day might be a goal for moving some gas price-related legislation.
The sooner the better. We're going to continue to act with urgency to meet the moment, address the needs of the American people. We understand that gas prices hit American families hard. It's a day-to-day or week-to-week, certainly a month-to-month expense, and it's going to require a comprehensive response. That comprehensive response is in the works, and the sooner we can get it done, the better, hopefully over the next few weeks. Last question was, I'm sorry. Well, I'll go to you last. I like to do my alternate sides thing, so, all right, thank you.
Do you agree with Congressman's belief that Congressman Gates might have done something illegal in the comments he made about other members? And if so, what would you be prepared to do about a member who's made threats against another member or who's done something illegal?
Well, we've acted in at least 2 instances related to both Marjorie Taylor Greene, completely out of control, Gosar, out of control, uh, we could spend all day, all week, every month dealing with the out of control caucus conference on the other side of the aisle. At a certain point, I think leadership on the other side has to step in, or perhaps they're being led by others. And so let them work out whatever they have to work out. It would be nice, as Pete has said, if instead of the infighting, the chaos, shots fired against each other, the knife fights in the phone booth that is the modern day House Republican conference, that they would actually decide to work with us on issues of importance to the American people. They have declined, perhaps because they have no vision, no ideas, no public policy objective. It's all about the acquisition of power. That's it. That's the defining objective of the other side of the aisle. And of course, bending the knee to the twice impeached former so-called president of the United States. Last question.
Two things quickly. MTA, that you all sent a letter to them requesting information about the shooting and the cameras working there. Have you gotten any response? Do you see a legislative response there? And then second, there are lawmakers, including from the New York delegation, that are popping up at campaign events while filing proxy vote letters saying they can't be here because of COVID. Do you feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, well, with respect to the latter part of, the second part of your question, I haven't seen that. It hasn't been called to my attention. To the extent that it is, I'll have a comment, thereafter. With respect to the letter that was sent, led by Congressman Torres, as well as Congresswoman Yvette Clark, in response to the tragic subway shooting that took place in Sunset Park, where there were MTA cameras that weren't functioning. It's a miracle that no one died. And we're thankful for the leadership of the NYPD, the fire department, the first responders, our healthcare heroes. But if we are going to provide resources to the MTA or any other state or local governmental entity, I think it's Congress's responsibility to make sure that those resources are effectively and efficiently and equitably utilized. And I haven't seen a response yet from the MTA. I do anticipate that they will provide one. And I certainly think the New York delegation and House Democrats will stay on the case. Thank you, everyone.